Welcome back, everyone. I'm so excited for this deep dive. Today, we're tackling a topic that I think we can all relate to, improving our English listening skills.
Absolutely. It's such a fundamental part of language learning, but it often gets overlooked.
It really does. We've got some fascinating sources to dig into today, so I'm ready to jump right in. The first one I have here emphasizes the importance of making English listening a daily habit, like even just 10 minutes a day.
Yeah, consistency is key, right? It's just like working out or eating healthy. You don't have to spend hours and hours to see results. Even a little bit each day can make a huge difference.
Totally agree. Speaking of starting small, in your notes you suggested resources like BBC Learning English and ESL Pod.
Oh, those are classics. They use such clear and simple language, which is perfect if you're just starting out.
I remember those. They really helped me when I was first learning English. Okay, let's move on to another tip. I actually used to rely on subtitles a lot when I was watching movies in English, but you've actually suggested using subtitles in a slightly different way.
Right. So think of subtitles as like training wheels. They're super helpful in the beginning, but the goal is to eventually ride that bike on your own.
I like that. So start with subtitles to help you connect the spoken words with what you see on the screen, but then gradually try to wean yourself off them.
Exactly. Maybe start by watching with subtitles for 10 minutes, then turn them off for 5. Slowly increase those subtitle-free intervals, and before you know it, you'll be cruising along without them.
That's a great strategy. It's like a personalized subtitle detox. Okay, let's talk about something I think is super important: the power of context. Sometimes I find myself in situations where I don't understand every single word, but I can still follow the conversation just by paying attention to the overall context.
Oh, absolutely. Context is like this magic key that unlocks so much meaning, like tone of voice, facial expressions, even the background sounds. They all give you these little clues that help you figure things out.
Right. It's not about catching every single word. It's more about understanding the big picture.
Precisely. You've got it.
Speaking of figuring things out, you also mentioned something called shadowing. I'll be honest, I've heard of it, but I've always been a little intimidated to try it.
It sounds more complicated than it is. Basically, you just listen to a short audio clip and try to mimic the speaker's pronunciation and intonation in real time, like you're their shadow.
Interesting. So you're basically echoing what they say.
Exactly. It might feel a little awkward at first, but it's an amazing way to improve your listening speed, your pronunciation, and even your speaking confidence all at once.
Wow, that's like a triple bonus.
It really is.
Okay, on to a challenge that I think we've all experienced at some point: understanding different accents. I remember when I first started traveling and encountering all these different accents, it was like my brain just short-circuited.
I get it. It can definitely feel overwhelming. But the more you expose yourself to those different accents, the easier it becomes to understand them.
So it's like training our ears to become global citizens. That's a great way to put it. So any tips for how to actually do that? Like, where should we even start?
Well, you've got so many resources right at your fingertips. Like, you could seek out international interviews, news reports from different countries, even online videos, anything that gives you exposure to a variety of accents.
So just make it a regular part of our listening diet. I like it.
Exactly.
Okay, even with all this practice, sometimes we're going to come across sentences that just throw us for a loop, right? Those long and complex sentences that feel like they'll never end. Any advice for how to tackle those?
It's funny. We often try to digest that whole sentence at once.
We do.
And it can be so overwhelming. So instead of trying to conquer that entire sentence in one go, try breaking it down into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Okay, so like looking for those key words or phrases that carry the most meaning?
Exactly.
Sometimes I even write those phrases down so I can go back and really think about them.
That's a great strategy. It's like becoming a sentence detective.
It is. Okay, on to another important point. Textbooks and language learning apps are great and all, but sometimes they don't quite capture how people actually talk in real life.
Right. They can be a little too perfect sometimes.
Exactly. So how do we bridge that gap between textbook English and the real world?
Well, you've touched upon it in your notes. Real-life conversations, right?
Yeah.
They've got this rhythm and flow that you just don't find in those perfectly scripted dialogues.
Yes. It's all about the natural flow. So how do we immerse ourselves in those real-world conversations?
Well, you've got podcasts.
Podcasts, yeah.
And you mentioned movies earlier. Those are great, too.
Oh, definitely. I love watching movies in English.
They're such a fun way to practice your listening skills.
They are. But I have to admit, when I first started watching movies without subtitles, I would constantly pause and rewind to catch everything. It was like a workout for my pause button.
I bet. But think about how much your listening has improved since then.
That's true. It definitely has. But sometimes I still find myself getting lost in fast-paced conversations. Is there anything I can do to kind of speed up my brain,
There is. It might sound a little weird at first, but have you ever tried predicting the words before you hear them?
Wait, like a word psychic?
Exactly. It's like a little game to keep your brain engaged, and it can actually help you process those spoken words more quickly.
Ooh, that sounds fun. So like if someone says, I went to the store to buy some, you might predict they're going to say milk or bread.
Exactly. You're using your prior knowledge and those context clues to kind of guess what's coming next.
I like that. I'm going to start using my word psychic powers.
I love it.
Okay, on to another point that you highlighted that I think is so important. Breaking the habit of translating everything into our native language. I'll admit I used to be so guilty of this.
It's such a common trap. We get so used to thinking in our native language that it's hard to break free.
It really is. I remember when I finally started thinking in English, it was like this huge breakthrough.
It is. It really is. Because when you're constantly translating, you're basically creating this extra step in the listening process.
It's like running a mental marathon.
Right. And it's exhausting.
Yeah.
But when you think directly in English, you can bypass that translation step and create this much more direct connection between what you hear and what it means.
Right. It's like you're speaking the language of your thoughts.
Exactly.
Okay, I want to ask you about something you marked as really important in your notes. This idea that 80% of everyday English conversations use only 20% of common words. Is that really true?
It is, and it's such good news for English learners because it means you don't need to memorize this giant dictionary to understand most conversations.
That's such a relief. It's like the 80-20 rule for English fluency.
Exactly.
So if we find some great listening material that's full of those common words and phrases, what's the best way to really make them stick?
You're already thinking ahead. And your notes mention repetition, which I think is key. But it's not just about listening to the same audio over and over again. It's about listening actively and with a purpose.
So how do we do that? Give me an example.
Okay, so the first time you listen, just try to get the overall gist of what's being said. The second time through, maybe take some notes or write down any words you don't understand. And then the third time, you could try shadowing or repeating sections out loud to practice your pronunciation.
So each listen has a slightly different focus.
Exactly.
I like that. It keeps your brain engaged.
It does.
Okay, I have to admit, sometimes practicing listening on my own can feel a little lonely. Any suggestions for how to make it more social?
I'm so glad you asked. You actually highlighted one of my favorite resources in your notes, which is English listening groups and language exchange communities. They're like online hubs where you can connect with other English learners from all over the world.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those. It's like having a global English conversation party.
It is. And you mentioned some great websites and apps in your research, like HelloTalk and Tandem.
Right. Those sound like great places to start. I think it's so easy to get caught up in the goal of fluency and forget that learning English should also be a fun and enjoyable experience.
Absolutely.
I mean, I learned so much English just from watching movies and listening to music that I love, and that never felt like studying. It just felt like fun.
And that's the best way to learn. When you're genuinely enjoying what you're doing, your brain is much more receptive to new information.
That's so true.
It is.
So it's all about finding those things that spark our curiosity and let that passion guide our learning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point to pause for now. We've covered so much ground already. I want to give you some time to reflect on what we've discussed so far.
That's a great idea. And before we dive back in, I want to remind everyone that we'll be sharing links to all of the resources mentioned today in the show notes. So don't worry about trying to remember everything right now. Just relax, enjoy the conversation, and we'll pick up where we left off next time.
As we were talking about enjoying the process of learning, I thought it really ties into something we were discussing earlier, breaking the habit of translating everything into your native language.
Oh, right. It's funny because I remember when I was first learning English, I would literally be in conversations and my brain would be like working overtime trying to translate every single word back and forth. It was exhausting.
It really is. It's like trying to juggle while riding a unicycle.
I love that analogy. Okay, so how can we start to break free from that translation trap?
Well, you actually hit on a key strategy in your notes.
Yeah.
Thinking directly in English.
Right, and I remember when I finally started thinking in English, it was like this huge weight was lifted off my shoulders.
It is.
Conversations just flowed so much more easily.
Exactly. It's like switching from dial-up internet to high-speed broadband.
I can't believe I used to live life on dial-up.
But think about the progress you've made. Now let's talk about something that might surprise you. Remember that statistic you highlighted about how 80% of everyday English conversations use only 20% of common words?
Right. I thought that was so encouraging.
It is encouraging.
Because it made me feel like fluency wasn't this impossible mountain to climb.
Exactly. And it's a game changer because it means you don't need to know this massive vocabulary to understand most conversations.
Right. It's about mastering those high-frequency words and phrases that pop up all the time.
Exactly.
So once we've found some great listening material that's full of those common words, what's the best way to really learn them?
You're ahead of me. In your notes, you mentioned repetition, and I think that's key. But it's not just about listening to the same audio on repeat. It's about listening actively, each time with a slightly different focus.
Oh, okay. Give me an example.
Sure. So the first time you listen, just try to get the overall gist of what's being said. The second time through, maybe take some notes or jot down any words or phrases you don't understand. And then the third time, you could even try shadowing the speaker or repeating sections out loud to practice your pronunciation.
So each listen has a slightly different focus.
Exactly.
I like that. It keeps your brain engaged.
It does.
Okay, I have to admit, sometimes practicing listening on my own can feel a little lonely. Any suggestions for how to make it more social?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because in your notes, you highlighted one of my favorite resources, English listening groups and language exchange communities. They're like virtual hubs where you can connect with other English learners from all over the world.
Oh, it's like having a global English conversation party.
It really is. You can practice listening to different accents, get feedback on your own pronunciation, and even learn about different cultures. Plus, it's a great way to stay motivated and have fun while you're learning. You mentioned a few websites and apps in your research, like HelloTalk and Tandem. Have you tried those?
I haven't tried those specific ones, but I love the idea. I think it's so easy to get caught up in like the goal of fluency and forget that learning English should also be like a fun and enjoyable experience.
It should be. And speaking of enjoying the process, I think it's so important to celebrate those small wins along the way.
Oh, yeah.
Each time you understand a new word, follow a conversation without subtitles, or even just have the confidence to speak up in English, give yourself a pat on the back.
I love that. It's like giving ourselves permission to celebrate those little victories that often go unnoticed.
Exactly. And remember, there's no one right way to learn English. The most important thing is to find what works best for you.
That's such a good point. We all learn so differently.
We do. So experiment with different approaches. If you love movies, watch them in English. If you're a music fan, dive into the lyrics of your favorite songs. Find what sparks your curiosity and let that passion fuel your learning journey.
Okay, before we go any further, I want to remind everyone that we'll be sharing links to all of the resources mentioned in today's episode in the show notes.
Absolutely.
So if anything piques your interest, be sure to check those out.
And as we move into our final thoughts, I'd love to hear your reflections. What are some of the biggest takeaways for you so far?
Going through these notes, it's amazing how much we've actually covered in this deep dive.
I know, right?
We've talked about everything from making listening a daily habit to actually thinking in English.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. But one of the biggest things I'm taking away from this is that it's okay to make mistakes.
Oh, absolutely. I think sometimes we get so caught up in trying to be perfect,
Right.
that we forget that mistakes are actually a crucial part of learning.
Totally. It's like if we're not making mistakes, we're probably not pushing ourselves hard enough.
Exactly. Mistakes are like those little signposts that tell us, where we need to focus our attention.
So it's not about avoiding mistakes, it's about learning from them.
Absolutely. Each time you make a mistake, you're actually creating this opportunity to learn and to grow.
That's a really empowering way to look at it. And I think it ties into something else we talked about, which is being patient with ourselves.
Right. Learning a language takes time and effort, and there will be moments of frustration along the way.
Oh, yeah.
But it's important to remember that, progress isn't always linear.
It's so true. Some days you feel like you're on top of the world.
Yes.
And other days you feel like you're, right back to square one.
Exactly. But the key is to keep going.
Keep going.
Keep practicing, keep challenging yourself, and, keep celebrating those small wins along the way.
So before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to something you said earlier that really resonated with me. which was this idea that improving your English listening skills can really open up a world of possibilities.
It really can.
So true.
When you can understand and engage with the world around you in English, it's like this whole new universe opens up.
Yes. Like you suddenly have the key to unlock all these amazing experiences.
Exactly. You can connect with people from different cultures, travel with confidence, pursue, educational or professional goals. It's incredible.
It's so exciting. So for anyone listening who might be feeling a little overwhelmed or discouraged, what would you say to them?
I would say, remember why you started this journey in the first place.
Yeah.
Remember that excitement you felt when you first, realized you could understand a few words or phrases in English. Tap back into that sense of curiosity and wonder and let it fuel your learning.
It's such great advice, and I think that's the perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of better English listening. We hope you found it insightful and inspiring.
It's been a pleasure. And remember, dear listener, the journey to fluency is ongoing. But with each step you take, you're getting closer to your goals. Keep practicing, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep believing in yourself.
And don't forget to check out the show notes for links to all the resources we've mentioned throughout this deep dive. Happy listening!